Hello, everyone out there in the world today. This is Erica Swenson Elliott. It is February 22nd, the year of our Lord 2025, and I am reading into the record something from the public domain that was first published by a Native American from New York State, David Cusick, Cusick. His account that he first wrote and put together in the year 1825 at Tuscaroran Village in New York, and it was not published by any English press until 1848 in Lockport, New York, by Turner and McCollum printers. This has been long in the public domain. I found a copy of it on archive.org, where you, as a reader or researcher, can create your own free account as well and access this full manuscript yourself. So the title of it is David Cusick Sketches of Ancient History of the Six Nations, comprising first a tale of the foundation of the Great Island, all in capitals, parentheses, now North America, the two infants born, and the creation of the universe. There's a few other accounts that David had recorded, but today I'm going to just read this one into the record. And why am I picking this book up? I myself am an author, and I've been writing the calendar novels, which is my spiritual fiction series. I'm coming close to publishing the fourth one in the series. So thus far I have the winter collection out, which begins with the January novel, the February novel, and the March novel. I wrote the March novel a couple years ago, and I started with giants in South Carolina as one of the themes. At the time I did not have access to this book, was not aware of it. So I find it very interesting that I'm finding it now a couple years later as I'm getting ready to complete the April novel. And this theme of ancient giants and Native American Indians, First Nation peoples are connected to South Carolina in this book, and as well as to the state of New York. So just from the preface, I found this really nice. It's dated June 10th, 1825. And David Cusick is his English name, but he is from a tribal nation. I'm going to read a little bit of his biography to you next. But at the preface of his book, he begins, I have been long waiting in hopes that some of my people who have received an English education would have undertaken the work as to give a sketch of the ancient history of the Six Nations, but found no one seemed to concur in this matter. After some hesitation, I determined to commence the work, but found the history involved with fables, and besides, examining myself, finding so small, educated that it was impossible for me to compose this work without much difficulty. After various reasons, I abandoned the idea. I, however, took up a resolution to continue the work, which I have taken much pains procuring the materials and translating it into English. I have endeavored to throw some light on the history of the original population of the country, which I believe never have been recorded. I hope this little work will be acceptable to the public. David Cusick, Tuscaroran Village, June 10th, 1825. I feel like the complexity of their language is really impressive. Reading it, all of our little 8th grade education pieces is my social commentary when you pick up any kind of newspaper print of today. Just a little bit about David Cusick. If you come to Wikipedia, and what they've kind of put together as of this date is he was a Tuscarora artist and the author of the book that we're going to read together. He was born between 1780 and 1785, so that would be right after the American Revolution was wrapping up, probably in upstate New York on Oneida or Oneida land. He was a Tuscarora, and his father was Nicholas Cusick, who was a Revolutionary War veteran himself. His father was an interpreter for the Congregationalist mission to the Seneca Indians. David was most likely attending the mission school where he learned to read and write English, and he had a younger brother, Dennis, who was a watercolor painter that was self-taught, and were the basis of the beginning of the Iroquois Realist School of Painting. David, the author, served in the War of 1812, and his village was burned down by the British in the state of New York era. One of the interesting things about the family, and if you go on there, there's some of the engravings are on the Wikipedia page, but they were originally down in South Carolina, and I probably during the whole leading up to the Revolutionary War is how they got up into the state of New York and settled down, if you follow the history of the tribe. So to come back to his book, this myth is probably not really a myth, but just this is what we had, an oral tradition. It's most likely that he is the first and potentially the only Native American to record in English, in writing, the oral histories of the beginning of the world. So if we think about that in our Christian tradition, this would be like he's the first one recording the book of Genesis and in writing the creation of the world. And there are a lot of similarities. Me, as a minister's daughter, I grew up with lots of books around me, as we've talked about in the previous episode. We're kind of diving down more into this Native American myth, and I'm kind of trying to compare some of the parallels between the two stories and how there's a lot of similarities. So one of the first pictures and engravings that are in his book here at the first flap is Atotarho, Atotarho, who was a famous war chief and resided at Onondaga. So you see him sitting down with his peace pipe, and there's two warrior braves standing in front of him and a little dog, which is kind of cute. And he has an interesting, almost like snakes on his head. So I don't know how to pronounce this well. I'm not good at pronunciations to begin with, but Atotarho is the phonetic spelling of his name. Then there's another picture of a war dance. Okay, so now we're going to get to part one. A tale of the foundation of the great island, now North America. The two infants born and the creation of the universe. Such an interesting title. A tale of the foundation of the great island, which is now North America. The two infants that were born and the creation of the universe. So this is just fascinating to hear, like from this perspective, it's North America is the beginning of the universe. And today, geologists will say that the Appalachian Mountains are the most ancient mountain range in the world today, and that is recognized. And because they're so worn down and small, like that's how we know that they're older than the European mountains, older than the mountains in the Rocky Mountain range in the west of America. Among the ancients, there were two worlds in existence. The lower world was in great darkness, the possession of the great monster, but the upper world was inhabited by mankind. And there was a woman conceived and would have the twins born. So the lower world's in great darkness, in the possession of a great monster. So in our Christian tradition, that would be Satan, the devil. So it's the same, thought is already here. But the upper world was inhabited by mankind. So there's like humans already there. And there was a woman, conceived and would have twins born. When her travail drew near and her situation seemed to produce a great distress on her mind, she was induced by some of her relations to lay herself on a mattress, which was prepared so as to gain refreshments to her wearied body. But while she was asleep, the very place sunk down towards the dark world. The monsters of the great water were alarmed at her appearance of descending to the lower world, to their place. In consequence, all of the species of the creatures were immediately collected into where it was expected she would fall. And when the monsters were assembled, and they made consultation, one of them was appointed in haste to search the great deep, in order to procure some earth, if it could be obtained. Accordingly, the monster descends, which succeeds, and returns to the place. Another requisition was presented, who would be capable to secure the woman from the terrors of the great water, but none was able to comply except a large turtle came forward and made proposal to them to endure her lasting weight, which was accepted. So there's a very ancient turtle myth that the turtle was like the beginning of the earth, and there's ancient Indian myths to this day that Turtle Island is a reference still, and that the Appalachian Mountains are the spine of the turtle's shell. So this is like those things today come from this very line. So this is very interesting because this is the first time it's been written down in 1825, and he really worked his whole life to get this into writing. And I should say, Cusick was really persecuted by the white man after it was published because of the potential conflicts with, what their Christian tradition was. But now looking back in history, it seems like there's a lot of similarities between the two stories and that they were recording them in different ways. So this whole woman descending down into the darkness, it's kind of like it was like the beginning of the world, right? Like the physical really wasn't here yet. So they're trying to find some physical earth for her to be a part of, because she was in so much pain. The pain was making her leave the plane she was on and descend down into the darkness where there was no earth. It's very interesting. Okay, so back to the turtle. The woman was yet descending from a great distance. The turtle executes upon the spot, and a small quantity of earth was varnished on the back part of the turtle, otherwise the shell. While holding her, the turtle increased every moment, and became a considerable island of earth, and apparently covered with small bushes. The woman remained in a state of unlimited darkness, and she was overtaken by her travail, or pain otherwise, to which she was subject. While she was in the limits of distress, one of the infants in her womb was moved by an evil opinion, and he was determined to pass out under the side of the parent's arm, or the mother's arm, and the other infant in vain endeavored to prevent his design. So now you have the twins fighting in her womb. And instead of coming out of the womb, he's trying to come out through the side underneath of her arm, which is almost like the whole thing with Adam, right, and Eve coming out through the side, like with the rib. She's like from the side of Adam. So that's like a similar theme here, coming out and being told in a different way. The woman was in a painful condition during the time of their disputes, meaning the babies. And the infants entered the dark world by compulsion, and their parent, or their mother, expired in a few moments. So this is kind of like an Adam and Eve kind of thing as well, where they're no longer eternal. She dies, and now they're born into a fallen, sinful world. So we talk about the fall in the Christian tradition, and now we're being born into a sinful, fallen world. She fell, they're like born in the fallen world. So that's very similar too. The twins had the power of sustenance without a nurse, and they remained in the dark regions. After a time, the turtle increased to a great island, and the infants were grown up. So the turtle turned into a great island of earth. They didn't need any food yet, and the twins grew up. One of them possessed a gentle disposition, and his name was Enigo Rio, or Enigo Rio, Enigorio, otherwise known as the Good Mind. So Enigo Rio is the Good Mind. The other youth possessed an insolence of character and was named Enigo Ha-Het-Gia. Enigon Ha-Het-Gia. The bad mind. And thankfully we're going to use the words good mind and bad mind from here on out. But this is another example of the bunching of syllables and a lot of the phonetic spellings of native words that we see today, especially tied to land masses. But these are, the good mind is Enigo Rio, the bad mind is Enigon Ha-Het-Gia. The good mind was not contented to remain in a dark situation, and he was anxious to create a great light in the dark world. But the bad mind was desirous that the world should remain in a natural state. The good mind determines to prosecute his designs and therefore commences the work of creation. So when I think about this, and after I'm going to put this idea into your head and see what you think, the good mind and the bad mind, there's a lot of storyline about Jesus Christ, his coming to earth, and Satan's fall to earth from heaven as an angel fighting because of his pride, wanting to be bigger and larger than God, the Creator. And so he falls to earth. And then there's this whole three temptations of Christ when Jesus comes and reincarnates again as a baby and grows up. His brother from heaven, his estranged brother from heaven, Satan tries to tempt him to turn away from the creation and worship Satan or Lucifer. So there's this whole very similar thing here with the two of them down on earth, Jesus and his being tempted by his estranged fallen angel brother Lucifer. So it's like this battle is being recorded here again in this North American ancient myth of creation. So the good mind brother, he takes his parents' head, his deceased mother, of which he created an orb, and he established it in the center of the firmament. It became of a very superior nature to bestow light to the new world, now known as the sun. So he takes his dead mother's head and turns it into the sun to light the darkness of the world. So if you think about, like, I am the Son of God, bring light to the world, S-O-N and S-U-N, there's still a lot of ancient connections to this, and the Genesis story of creation as well, with first creating the sun. Then he took the remnant of his mother's body and formed another orb, which was inferior to the light, now known as the moon. In the orb, a cloud of legs appeared to prove it was the body of the good mind, the parent, the mother. The former was to give light to the day, and the latter to the night. So if you come back to the moon, so he takes her body and forms another orb inferior to the light, which is now the moon. In that orb, a cloud of legs appeared to prove it was the body of the good mind or the dead parent. So this is like interesting too with some of the myths and stories and conspiracies about the moon potentially being a foreign ancient object. And this would be the fact that it has legs, like it could move around. It's kind of interesting to me, or like it was oars on a ship kind of thing. So the former was to give light to the day, and the latter, the moon, was light to the night. The good-minded brother also created numerous spots of light, now the stars, and these were to regulate the days, nights, seasons, years, etc. Whenever the light extended to the dark world, the monsters were displeased and immediately concealed themselves in the deep places, lest they should be discovered by some human beings. It was like they weren't being able to be seen yet. The good mind brother continued the works of creation, and he formed numerous creeks and rivers on the great island. And then he created numerous species of animals of the smallest and greatest to inhabit the forests, and fish of all kinds to inhabit the waters. When he had made the universe, he was in doubt respecting some being to possess the great island. And he formed 2 images of the dust of the ground in his own likeness, male and female. And by his breathing into their nostrils, he gave them living souls. So the good mind brother gave them living souls, and he named them the real people, Ia Gwe Hawa, Eagwehowe. So maybe Igwe How or Hawa. So this would be the male and female. This could be the Adam and Eve again. And this is like the God, the good mind, creating Adam and Eve out of the dust, of very similar, breathes into them life, same thing, making them the real people because he wants them to live on the great island. So if you think about the first chapter of John, the Gospel, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God, and the Word was with God. So again, if that word ends up referring to Jesus Christ and being there at the beginning. So the good mind brother would again be the Jesus, the Christ figure. And the bad mind brother would again be the Lucifer / Satan character. Okay, so another similarity. The good-minded brother gave the great island all the animals of game for their maintenance, and he appointed thunder to water the earth by frequent rains, agreeable to the nature of the system. After this, the island became fruitful, and vegetation afforded the animals subsistence. But the bad mind brother was making the universe. But the bad mind, while his brother was making the universe, went throughout the island and made numerous high mountains and falls of water, great steeps. So instead of it being all now gentle, he's making high, dangerous mountains and big waterfalls, great steeps, like inclined declines. He also created the reptiles, which would be injurious to man. So snakes, lizards, alligators, crocodiles. So that, according to the North American native myth, it was the bad-minded brothers that created so much of the contrast, distortions in the land, and then the reptiles. And this would be similar to the snake story in the Genesis Bible story tradition of the snake or the serpent tempting Eve, the woman. Okay, back to the North American myth. But the good mind brother restored the island to its former condition. And the bad-minded brother proceeded further in his motives, and he made two images of clay in the form of mankind. But while he was giving them existence, they became apes, or monkeys. And when he had not the power to create mankind, he was envious against his brother, and again he made two of clay. So this is interesting too, because it goes back to, what we've discovered with the DNA. Kind of proves that they weren't really related. Had some similarities, but they weren't exactly the same. And now that we see why, one's coming from like a negative source. The good-minded brother discovered his brother's contrivances and aided in giving them living souls. There's an asterisk there. So the good-minded brother actually gave them life because the bad mind couldn't. It is said that these had the most knowledge of good and evil. So the good-minded brother gives them living souls, and it appears by the fictitious accounts that the said beings became civilized people and made their residence in the southern parts of the island, but that afterwards they were destroyed by the barbarous nations, and their fortifications were ruined until this day. So this is almost like clones. Like the bad mind brother made clones. So he made the apes. And then the bad mind brother tried again, and he made the clay, and then they still weren't alive till the good mind brother breathed life into him. So there's also this, like, you have to be good to be able to create life instead of destruction. Okay, where did I go here? So the good mind now accomplishes the works of creation, notwithstanding the imaginations of the bad mind were continually evil. And he attempted to enclose all the animals of game in the earth, so as to deprive them from mankind. But good mind released them from confinement. The animals were dispersed, and traces of them were made on the rocks near the cave where it was closed. So this is like also kind of like a Garden of Eden, like running from the garden. But it was almost like in an inverse, where the bad guy was trying to keep them locked up in a way from the good's creation. It's also, he keeps using the term good mind and bad mind, so it's as if they're not incarnate themselves. It's like they are spiritual beings or minds that were creating things in the earth. So they weren't, good mind and bad mind were literally mind only. The good mind experiences that his brother was at variance with the works of creation and feels not disposed to favor any of his proceedings, but gives admonitions of his future state. Afterwards, the good mind requested his brother to accompany him as he was proposed to inspect the game, meaning the animals. But when a short distance from their mononal, and I don't know if this must be an old word we don't use anymore, MONINAL, mononal residence, the bad man became so unmanly that he could not conduct his brother anymore. The bad man offered a challenge to his brother and resolved that who gains the victory should govern the universe, and appointed a day to meet the contest. The good mind was willing to submit to the offer, and he enters the reconciliation with his brother, which he falsely mentions that by whipping with flags would destroy his temporal life. And he earnestly solicits his brother also to notice the instrument of death, which he manifestly relates by the use of deer horns. beating his body, he would expire. That sounds very mysterious. I'm not sure which brother is doing which. On the day appointed, the engagement commenced, which lasted for 2 days. This is kind of like the Gilgamesh myth as well, like the fighting, the Middle Eastern Gilgamesh myth. So the good mind and the bad mind, they were pulling up the trees and mountains as the track of a terrible whirlwind. At last, the good mind gained the victory by using the horns, as mentioned, the instrument of death, which he succeeded in deceiving his brother, and he crushed him into the earth. And the last words uttered from the bad mind were that he would have equal power over the souls of mankind after death. And he sinks down to eternal doom and became the evil spirit. After this tumult, the good mind repaired to the battleground and then visited the people and then retires from the earth. There's a lot of similarities, very interesting. So again, Cusick is writing this down, this ancient oral tradition of how the world began in the North American myths. So there's like things that verify some of this, but it's also very similar to myths around the world. So it makes you think twice and more thoughtfully about the connections of these stories about humankind. There's more I'm going to read with him in another one, but enough with this story. The next one that David Cusick writes about is the Stonish Giants, which is pretty amazing. So, trying to get onto the record, the Native Americans' stories, so they're not brushed away into the sands of time. And if you want to read more spiritual fiction like based on this, you can come back to my website, ericaswensonelliott.com, and you can go to my spiritual fiction page where I have the calendar novel series. And maybe by the time you're listening to this, I will have the April novel up, or even some of the future books after that. And the Native Americans are kind of threaded through my novels. The February novel has a very heavy presence, actually starting up in the Canadian area and then coming down into the New York State, New York Island, Liberty Island, where Lady Liberty is, in the February novel. And then the March novel has the Giants, which is in the Native American tradition, which is how I got to Cusick's book. And they continue into the April novel, which is coming up, the Giants. So we'll do that in another session with Cusick's book here, which again, as far as we can tell, is the oldest written work by a Native American Indian himself who writes it into English because no one else would, David Cusick, who lived from about 1780 to 1840. Thanks for listening. Namaste.